Hello, and you're welcome to this special episode of Global Business Insight, where we'll do a deep dive on the topic of corruption and why it can be sticky to fight. But first, the main business headlines. China's central bank today launched a new lending tool to inject more liquidity into the market and support credit flow in the banking system. This comes ahead of the expiration of trillions of yuan in loans at the end of the year. This week in Wall Street, Ford Motor, Advanced Micro Devices, Alphabet, McDonald's, Meta Platforms, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Intel, and Uber Technologies are all reporting their Q3 results. Chevron and ExxonMobil closed the reporting week on Friday. More clues on the economy as more than 150 Wall Street companies are scheduled to report. Plus, we get the last set of data before the US Federal Reserve November meeting, and all this amid early voting in the world's largest economy. Meanwhile, Dutch medical devices maker Philips today lowered its sales forecast for the year due to declining demand in China, which led to order intake going down 2% in the third quarter. The main U.S. economic data highlight will be Friday's jobs report for October, where analysts expect a gain of 108,000 non-farm payrolls after a 254,000 increase in September. The unemployment rate also expected to hold steady at 4.1%. And in the UK, the big business news could be Chancellor Rachel Reeves' first budget. That's on Wednesday, expected to include significant tax rises and spending cuts. But to the main discussion on corruption in Nigeria, a topic that is often underreported, and when it hits the headlines pushed by social activists, mostly in foreign press and foreign courts, judges and maybe the younger generation of Nigerians are puzzled at the scale and how major contracts can be awarded in such a dodgy manner. Also on how it is possible that vital national resources like oil can be permitted to be stolen by a few in a brazen, apparently interminable process of grand theft that defies law enforcement mechanisms. Corruption blots should not be ignored, and there are still very many who do right. But silence is complicity. These are the gaping faults at the core of a leaking treasury, frustrating all the best intentions and efforts. The issue has to be discussed and addressed at the national and even continental level. Soji Apampa, who has been at the forefront on business integrity for over 30 years, comments on why corruption is so sticky, also suggesting a better way forward. Fighting corruption is well studied and research abounds on its causes and how to arrest it. It's motivated by intention to gain unfair competitive advantage or obtain an unjustified personal or corporate gain. In some cases, players believe they will be uncompetitive if they do not play ball. They fear victimization by a project owner who delays or denies due payments, so they normalize and build in grease money into costs. Complex large-scale contracts also need extra scrutiny as they have scores of contractual links, and every contractual link provides the opportunity for someone to pay a bribe in return for an award. Various stages of payments or certifications are also opportunities for bribes. Then there is the issue of insufficient reporting of corruption. Unless evidence that corruption will be prosecuted abounds, most individuals and organizations will continue to cheat. There is a strong correlation between freedom of the press and high ethical standards. Countries with low corruption also have high GDP per capita, they have low equity rates, and they also tend to have high literacy rates. We can learn indeed from countries like Finland, Sweden, Denmark, where you see a very high level of disclosure of budget information, closing the door to misappropriation of public funds. These countries enforce high code of conduct for public servants and have a no-nonsense legal framework criminalizing a wide range of corruption-related abuses, complemented with an independent and efficient judiciary. The latest data from Transparency International show Nigeria made marginal improvements to 25 over 100, and that's in the 2023 data, but still ranked very low. They were the 145th least corrupt nation out of 180 countries. A key driver of corruption is weak accountability. Less corrupt jurisdictions actively encourage citizens to assess how government manages public funds. The International Budget Partnership, in their own Open Budget Survey 2023, rated Nigeria low on public participation in budgets, rated barely adequate on budget oversight, and also low on transparency. Another factor that impacts corruption relates to code of conduct, that is enforcing, not just documenting, highest standards of behavior. This includes regular asset declarations, rules on gifts, and pre- and post-employment corruption to watch the revolving door between business and government. The least corrupt countries have protective legislation for whistleblowers and enough guardrails to curtail corruption risk in procurement. Political party finance regulation is also important. When stolen funds, whether private or public, flood into the coffers of politicians, it becomes a virus that infects appointments to boards and key roles. It drains resources, of course, as contracts are inflated to pay back some of those funds, also polluting public policies as lobbyists influence direction. Corruption at the scale we have seen in Nigeria has contributed to huge issues in weakening productivity, contributing to high cost of governance and difficulties in managing money supply, making nonsense of monetary policy. But corruption has many facilitators in the private sector. There is a neat handshake between public and private sector, and many pay and receive speed money. That's the small bribe paid to expedite a routine action that the payer is legally entitled to. The rest of society will contribute to corruption by just holding their nose at different forms of elite capture, instead of boldly calling it what it is or demanding consequences. They applaud directly or indirectly. In Nigeria, the key challenges such as managing impact of reforms in people and business, low revenues, high debt service, elevated inflation, food insecurity, and subdued levels of oil production are much more difficult to deal with amid the high levels of corruption. Corruption, the elephant in the room, quietly grins, derailing best intentions. Grease or speed money, considered less harmful and more pervasive, can be eliminated if service standards are public and more services are digitized, eliminating human contact as we see in developed economies. Elite capture is where few well-protected individuals of pedigree benefit hugely from a bias with public resources, with wholesale thefts of budgets, such as crude oil theft, as well as all types of policy manipulation to benefit selected individuals. Grand theft and elite capture, as it is prevalent in Nigeria and also seen with oligarchs in Russia, is more destructive and more difficult to address, and so needs more urgent attention. These should be exposed with severe consequences. In China, it is more of speed money and access money that you can do. Those who attempt resources or grand theft could be executed instantly. Soji Apampa, a political economy and corporate governance expert specializing in building integrity systems, is co-founder and CEO Convention on Business Integrity in Nigeria. He offers some insights.
On the question of why corruption is so sticky, people observe so many people in society getting away with doing the wrong thing. And then there is fear, apathy, and doubt induced in individuals because there seems to be no consequence for doing the wrong thing and no real tangible benefits for doing the right thing. So ordinary citizens start to question our collective value system, that these values that our parents espouse, does it really make any sense? Should I not just join them when I get the opportunity? So individual standards start to get eroded, and people are very unsure what they should do with what they've been told about ethics, about good conduct, and so on. So the resolve to hold formal standards and informal standards, the resolve to put some kind of social controls around the issue of corruption starts to wane, and it gets eroded. But guess what? When our resolve gets eroded, then the social tolerance for corruption becomes high. We're able to tolerate it because we also doubt, and some of us even think that corruption might still work for us. It's worked for other people. It might soon be my turn. Why should I be the one to change it when it could still work for me? So corruption and impunity are not actively prevented by anyone, not even people in government, not even people in office. They don't bother. So what happens? More and more people start to take undue advantage. And as they take undue advantage and there are no consequences for it, what happens? Many more lose faith in due process. And then you start to wonder, should I even bother to try and do the right thing? For some, it's the ideology, it's what they've been brought up with, and so on, that still restrains them. Otherwise, they will join everybody else. The threat of sanctions, therefore, by EFCC and by ICPC and these other agencies doesn't work. The threat of sanctions, it doesn't work. Why? Because so many people are getting away with it. Because so many more are pushing to also benefit from it. Because those who should be holding others accountable are also participating in it. And the question is, how many of us do they want to lock up? Who is going to get locked up at the end of the day? So perverse incentives then get locked into the system, and corruption increases. And that is how we go round and round in this cycle, from society to the systems in society, to the lack of sanctions, to the outcomes, corruption paying some people, and the end result is we institutionalize corruption. But as Professor Yuen Ang from the Johns Hopkins University has written, she writes a lot on corruption in China and corruption generally. And she argues that grand theft by the elites is what we see in Nigeria. But around the world, you don't get such opportunities, but it's still corruption. Speed money is what others pay for. Then elites in a place like the US pay for access money. Access to public policy, well, maybe they call theirs lobbying and so on, but there are so many other forms of corruption that take place. So it is our crass type, which involves elite capture of value, that damages our country. It's not that others are not corrupt, it's the type. And we need shared value, not captured value, shared value in order to be able to develop. So long as our elites are able to capture value from the top and not allow anything to work, and we don't have shared value in society, in the public goods, then corruption remains sticky.
Asia Pacific markets were higher. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 climbed, supported by a weak yen amid political uncertainty, as the ruling LDP lost its parliamentary majority. Well, that's it from me on this special episode on Global Business Insights. I am Bode Oshosami. Bye-bye.